Hi, my name is Akhil, and I will be your host for today's morning news show in Balonia, wherever that is. I have no idea. As many of you don't know, the presidential primaries are currently going on for the presidential race of 2016. There are 5 current candidates, 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans. On the Democratic side, there is Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. On the Republican side, there is Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich. Honestly, I don't know who John Kasich is. It doesn't really matter. He seems like an angry guy on the TV all the time, but whatever. He currently has a relatively significant number of pledged voters on the delegate side, so we have to discuss him at the very least. I'd like to begin by discussing how many delegates have pledged their vote to each candidate, starting with the Republicans. On the Republican side, Donald Trump has 846 pledged delegates. That's quite a lot for a very conservative, extremist conservative man who is coming with no political background to this race. On the other side, there is Senator Ted Cruz, who by no means knows what he's talking about at any moment in time, but he somehow has 563 pledged delegates, or 562 and 1 unpledged delegate. On John Kasich's side, he has 147. Let's just leave it at that. So, this is kind of interesting because it is very rare that someone that has never entered the political scene before comes in and does so well. Donald Trump, in a sense, I think, is doing this well because he sort of embodies that freedom of speech motion that a lot of people seem to like in a candidate. More than that, he seems to disagree with the current bureaucracy and government because he feels they're not doing a good job. He can do better because he's someone from the private sector who has a lot of knowledge in this area that a lot of politicians don't, and feels he can apply those pieces of knowledge and experience to the real political world by being the president or one of the highest nation's diplomat. Considering this, though, a lot of his ideas are very extremist, and a lot of his ideas are very, in a sense, discriminatory and racist and bigoted, because I feel the majority of his supporters are people from the conservative South. And a lot of people that want him are people that aren't ready to move on to the next era of love thy neighbor as I love thyself, because America is a melting pot, and if you want to have a strong melting pot community, you need to accept everyone and not take these people that are immigrating from Mexico and from other countries and push them out. That's not how you make America great again. It's how you make America go back into the dark ages. Now on to the Democrat side. I'd like to begin by talking about Hillary Clinton, who has 1954 pledged delegates. Or the super delegates are not exactly pledged, which she has 502 of, but the likelihood that they're going to change to her runner-up, Bernie Sanders, is very, very low. She does, however, have 1452 pledged delegates, which is almost 200 above, or more than 200 above, Sanders' 1241 delegates, with 42 superdelegates and approximately 1,200 pledged normal delegates. I'd like to just point out how superdelegates are extremely unfair, and although I would blame Hillary Clinton in this case, it's not necessarily the player's fault, but it is the game's fault, because superdelegates make it so that the party has more say over who will become the next presidential nominee for that party. And what's not fair is that it doesn't take into account the millions and millions of people that are voting in the primary in this popularity contest. What actually matters, though, is how the superdelegates, which there's almost approximately 700 of, can come in here and sway the results of this popularity contest in one person's favor. More than that, though, is the fact that when we discuss democracy, it's not exactly fair when the ruling party has so much input in who becomes the next nominee for next year. As I said, this is a popularity contest, but it's more now a contest of which candidate, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, can convince the superdelegates, convince the party to vote for them. And right now, Hillary's winning with 502 superdelegates, which is a result of her just being a stronger, more, I would say, moderate candidate, because the extremist, in a sense, liberal, not necessarily extremist, but the liberal democratic socialist Bernie Sanders is just someone that we've never really encountered before on the political scene. He's changing the game, he's doing everything he can, and although I don't think he'll win, just because of the sheer difference between the number of voters and delegates Clinton has versus Sanders, I do think he makes a good point, that the system, the game, is not fair. And while he's doing a very, very good job for someone who just walked in here a year ago with a lot of political experience, but very little, I guess, an idea of how to run for these things and win, has come in here, raised millions and millions of dollars off a non-Super PAC funded internet funding website, and just done so well in so many elections. And although he's doing so well, he can't compete with how much more electable, I would say, Clinton is in comparison to him, and in the eyes of the Democratic Party and those who vote as Democrats. So right now, I do not believe Sanders is going to win, although I can only hope so, that he does. But I do think he'll stick it out until the Democratic Convention, because he has a point to be made. The game isn't fair. The things that are wrong in this United States are Wall Street and are some of the capitalistic sort of greediness that are taking over a lot of what we do, are those offhand deals that the government has with corporations. There's just a lot of undemocratic behavior in our democracy, and I think that's his point. And even if he doesn't win, I'm glad he's making that point. On to the next question. I think currently there are some big states that are going to happen, but they're not necessarily important because we know the result. Things like Florida and California and New York vote mainly in one way. California specifically will vote Democratic, and that's in June, and that's why I think it's so much later, because it doesn't really matter in terms of... The only thing that matters regarding California is what percentage of their delegates are going to vote for Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton. That's the only question. Whether it votes Democratic or Republican is an already answered question, which is Democratic. Regarding some key endorsements lately, I'd like to note that Ted Cruz, although he's doing not so well in the delegate race in comparison to Donald Trump, has one of the highest number of representatives that are supporting him. He has 5 governors, 3 senators, and almost 20 or so representatives of our democracy who are supporting him, in comparison to the 48 and 43 approximate people that are supporting Donald Trump and John Kasich that are actually important. In the same way, Hillary Clinton, a much more electable candidate, is given a point value of 490 on Project 538's website about the endorsement primary, in comparison to Bernie Sanders' 13, where points are awarded 10 for a governor, 5 for a senator, and 1 point for each representative. It's just this 490 to 13 point gap is just more evidence as to why she's winning in this race. Furthermore, I'd like to discuss Donald Trump a little more extensively. As an extremist candidate, he comes in with a background that not many people have. And his sort of, I can say anything attitude is, although I can't say I don't like it, the way he's using this verbal power of his is not for the good of America. It's not making America great again, as he says. For instance, almost all of his campaigning on Twitter and online and on Facebook are negative campaigns. What that says about a potential future president of the United States is really quite scary. Because if they're not willing to work with others, and they're not willing to let go of their stubbornness and discuss things in a more responsible and mannerful way? How do we expect them to be at an international diplomatic scene? For instance, is Donald Trump even comparable to someone like Justin Trudeau, the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada? Or is he someone we just can't trust to form great relationships, or good relationships, or improve relationships with countries we're friends with already?